I'm just so grateful to you to agree to come and talk to me today, because there's so much that we know about you in your public image, but so little about the rest of you. So thank you very much. And I thought maybe you could open by telling us a bit more about your home life, you as a person.
Yeah, I started in 1945 as a war baby. Yes. The product of a liaison between my mother and an American airman, one of many in Norfolk. Was brought up in Norfolk until I was 4, 5, then moved up to Huddersfield in West Yorkshire with my adopted father. Three siblings. We lived there. I lived there until 1963. Went to grammar school, had a good education, then to King's College London, degree in geography. Joined planning department in central London for 3 years, didn't like it. Then did an MBA at the City University and came to Swindon in 1971. 1971 was one of the corporate planning team setting out the long-term strategy for Swindon, and worked there for some 19 years, initially in corporate planning. We produced a vision for Thames Down, which is really very much what's going on at the moment. And in the latter part of my career in Swindon, I ran economic development. And that's where I first met you, when we were dealing with the railway works closure. Responsible for inward investment, responsible for social and economic development within the town, training programs, support programs, particularly when the railway works closed in the mid-1980s. Remarried in 1987, was formerly living in Marlborough, had 4 children. Now live in Swindon in Old Town. Lived there since then. Feel a resident of Old Town. It's a lovely part of Swindon, very, very sort of relaxed and less busy than other parts of the town. And it's a great place to be with Linda, and I've got a stepson. My children are all adult, all working away. And we're expecting our first grandchild in September. So that's really where I am. What did we do? Highlights of the career. I think one of the highlights was really the work we all did on when supporting the railway workers in the 1987s. I was responsible in 1980s. I was responsible for economic inward investment. We did a lot of work then, and I can remember one day going down to Basingstoke with a colleague and being grilled by the senior staff of Motorola about the benefits of locating in Swindon. And 6 months later, Motorola moved to Swindon and created that wonderful building in the north of Swindon. They lasted for quite a long time, but unfortunately took the wrong turn technologically, and now a shadow of themselves, and the building is now used by a French firm, I believe. So a lot of really exciting work, a lot of thought about development training programs, understanding the needs of people. And that's really part of my philosophy. I try to understand what people need rather than to impose my thoughts on them. And I hope that's been reflected in the last year as Governor of District 1100.
It's amazing. It's a very full career that you had. Tell me, please, what attracted you to Rotary in the first place?
When I lived in Marlborough, I was part of the round table, and that was great fun. And it was something where we were out doing things and really having fun doing things, and really identifying what local people needed and trying to work towards that. And I felt that was something which ended partly because I'd left Marlborough to go when I was divorced, and was a bit of limbo. And in the mid-90s, I was talking to Mike Dunn on when I was working on the motor industry in Swindon, and I met Mike Dunn at a seminar, and we were chatting to him, and he lived in Swindon, ex-BT guy, now independent, working at Shrivenham, and a Rotarian. And he said, "Are you interested?" And I thought, "Well, I've done my round table, but I enjoyed it very much, enjoyed the social side and the, if you want, the community side, and was introduced to Swindon Old Town. I think it was about 1998 or so. Was there for some 6 or 7 years, and was president. Peter Davey was was my DG, and had a reasonably good year. I think in that time, I think we introduced you as the first lady member. I can remember the certain amount of kerfuffle going on about it. But now I think it's great, and virtually everyone now says we should have done this years ago, because women provide a different perspective on Rotary, and perhaps a more intuitive way of looking at the world and looking at community needs and responses. I think that's something which we in Rotary have really, really thought through. We've needed, and it's been of benefit to everyone. And it's great to see that next year we've got Nikki Scott as the first director of the RGBI region, which I think is a great step forward. And the year after that, we've got Jennifer Jones as the first RI president. So Rotary is making strides, but not as fast perhaps in creating diversity as perhaps some of us would wish. I was also getting to the age where the idea of getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go to a breakfast club in January was less appealing. And so I then moved to Swindon and spent a number of really good years there. I did a number of roles. I was club secretary for 3 years. As soon as I joined, someone said to me, "Are you any good at administration?" I thought, well, I better say yes, just in case. And before I knew it, I was the club secretary for 3 years. And that was a great job. So 3 years there, and in that time, Alan Hudson said, "Have you ever thought of being governor?" Well, I said, "I have to think about this." And I said yes. And from the last 3 years, we've been on the journey of being governor. And that's been a phenomenally interesting journey. You see a different perspective of Rotary. And because you're in that, if you want that, not higher, but more senior position, you're able to take a different perspective, perhaps a more reflective perspective on Rotary and how it's changing. You also get views from other parts of the country, other parts of the world. And you're able to sort of pull these together and see how you can adapt them within your own district. And that's really been the focus of the journey in the last year. And we were lucky, fortunate in that we did have an international assembly, the last one in San Diego. That was probably the highlight of the Rotary career, apart from being DG, because there you had all the world coming together, mixing and melding ideas, mixing and melding thoughts. And you're beginning to understand that perhaps we weren't as bad as we thought we were in this district. We had something to learn from people from all over the world, diverse cultures.
Chris, I mean, all that preparation and everything, the year that you then faced was completely different from anything anyone would have expected. I mean, who would know that you were going to spend the year of DG in a pandemic? So what would you say were your greatest challenges at that time?
Well, I think the first thing was tearing up the plan. Because you had to adapt to what was a very, it was turbulent and uncertain. Turbulence and uncertainty means that the plan does not survive. And the fact the plan is almost, certainly this year, the plan has almost been organic. It's evolved, and because there's nothing you can't plan. This is what we want to do. We want to set this up. We want to set that up, because it's not been possible. Because we've not been able to meet people, not been able to engage with people in the normal way. And morale, when, let's say, for example, when a club which has been normally met once a week has been told it can't, and it's got to go to Zoom, and all their plans are completely scrapped, then the responsibility of the district, of the governor and the governing team is very different. Rather than managing the year, the rhythm of the year, it's almost managing on a day-to-day basis, and it needs a totally different approach, bridging the distance between the district team and the club and the Rotarian, encouraging people to change. There's also an organic response by clubs, because as soon as the pandemic had its impact, people were locked down, people lost their jobs, they were in furlough and so forth. Many clubs in this district and wider afield responded magnificently. They supported local organisations, charitable, or even set up organisations to support people through things like food banks, food runs, supporting people, supporting children wherever they possibly could, organising the pharmacy runs, and many, many more things. And it's something which I'm really proud about this district. The response that we've had, it initially was magnificent. And many clubs have benefited from that. And I don't think at the beginning there was the idea, well, we'll do this because we're going to get new members. But one of the consequences of raising our profile in local communities has been that more people know about Rotary. And I believe in the next couple of years, we're going to get a membership dividend, that's what it's called, of more people wanting to join Rotary, because they've seen what we can do and how we do it. And by and large, we do it with a smile on our face, even when it's pouring down. And let's set more of these yellow tabards out, or sweatshirts, or whatever it might be, to say, we are Rotarians, we are people of action, we are at work helping you in the community, come and join us. That's really what we've been trying to do this year.
I'm going to say one of the things that you have had some very special projects, which certainly inspired me, the Beirut one, but also the modern slavery, which I think you really brought that to prominence in your year.
I think that's been interesting. We've had a lot thrown at us this year. Not only have we had the changing governance structure of Rotary Britain and Ireland, which did take up an awful lot of time in the first 9 months of the year. Unfortunately, the proposals were passed. But in addition to that, we had RGBI sent us the carers in this partnership. In some ways, that was a traditional top-down thing. And I think in this district, we have a tradition of very good community work. And to some extent, the need for the carers partnership approach has not been as needed as in other districts. I know in talking to my fellow DGs, they've used the approach in more depth than we have, because we have a lot of clubs who do have those community links. The biggest thing was August the 4th. I will never forget August the 4th last year. That was when it was the equivalent of a nuclear bomb hit Beirut. I had an immediate call from Gloucestershire Governor Ian Beattie of Bristol, who has got warm connections with Beirut and Lebanon and the Middle East generally. And he said, look, we need to do something. So I said, fine, there was a Just Giving. So we started the Just Giving. We reached out to the Rotary Club of Beirut Cedars, and we built up a phenomenal relationship with that club. Rotary Club of Cheltenham is 100 years old this year. It has been going through a bad patch. They lost passed our RGVI president Ian Thompson this year through, I think it was very early, he died earlier this year. But one of the projects they came up with this, if you've had a vaccine, donate the price of your vaccine so we can send it out to the developing world. We made contact with the COVAX Gavi people in Switzerland, and they said they've got a project going, and if you'd like to donate to it, then please do so. But you can't do gift aid because it's overseas. So David Evans and David Price and all his people and their people got together, set up this Just Giving scheme, encouraged donations with gift aid, and I think so far we've raised £25,000. But you mentioned modern slavery, and the great thing about what Simon John was talking about was about the hidden impacts of modern slavery, and needing to think about how we obtain our goods and services and become much more ethical and aware of those consequences. And it's something which I've talked about was at home with fellow Rotarians, and we said, right, we need to do something about this. There is a groundswell nationally about this, but I'm delighted when Simon said he was doing his bike ride, and that really got some impetus within the district, and the event earlier this year, together with other associated events, I think has raised awareness of the impact of modern slavery and what we can do about it.
It sounds to me you've had a really this has been hugely taken up so much time. What part of the role would you say has given you the most pleasure?
I think talking to people, talking with people, having conversations and inspiring people and saying, well, these are some of the things I'd like people to consider. I'm not saying you've got to do it, because I'm sure, like you, when you get stuff coming down from RI or RGBI, it's written in RI and RGBI language. It's the DG's role to translate that language into language which ordinary people can understand and empathize with. I'm not patronizing people's ability, but sometimes if you read the official language, it doesn't really make sense. And one of the things I think has been great is being able to talk to people and say, what we're looking at this year is the 3 C's. You know, the change, giving permission to change, encouraging people to learn from what's going on with clubs next door or even further afield, and then communicate and tell people what we've done. First change was meeting on Zoom or meeting electronically. And that's really spawned a number of other things. It's enabled Rotarians to increase their skill sets, but it's also meant that people who perhaps weren't able to get to meetings or for whatever reason, Rotarians in their clubs always reached out to them and kept them informed. So the reaction was that more people knew more about what was going in their clubs. In many cases, attendance at the virtual meetings grew over and above what the physical attendance was. So that was something which was great. The collaboration, I think, is inevitable, because as Rotary, the demographics of our clubs change, and we do have the gap between the existing demographic focus and what we really are looking for, younger, more able and active people who can develop what we're doing. The collaborate is that clubs wanted to do things but didn't have the resources to do that. So the collaboration is not just with other clubs, but it's also with other organisations within the club areas. So in the case of your club, you're building a very strong relationship with the local parish council. And the communication thing, as you well know, Roche is the best known organisation that keeps itself secret. And communication in other parts of the world is much more effective than, and this is a very big generalisation, than it has been in throughout our GBI. And by communication, you're telling people a good story, and by communication, you're telling people a good story, what we do. And if people hear about the story and they like it, then they will attend local events, they will attend local, perhaps even go to a meeting, and perhaps in the event even join the Rotary. And if we don't tell people what we're doing, why are we surprised when no one joins?
Very good point.
And so that's, I think, is so important and I'm delighted that this year we've been able to sort of throw things around and come out with, I think, what is a model for the future. The governor's year goes so quickly, and you're buffeted from one place to another. And unless you have that stability and an idea of where the strategy is going in the future, then you're going to have a different view every year. Yes, we have a strategy. We know where we would like the district to grow, and clubs have been able to support what we've been doing, to intervene, and we've listened and acted.
It doesn't sound to me like you're going to have a lot of spare time after all at the end of this year. Are you obviously going? What roles have you got apart from as an immediate district governor? But I bet you've taken on other.
I mentioned earlier I'm an internationalist. I'm going to be international lead for the district, and I'm building up a team. Because again, one of the things I've noticed is that we have a history of good international relations in the district. In addition to that, as you know, I spent over 30 years teaching and working in universities, training and developing senior professionals on MBA programs. One of the things which Graham alluded to this the other day, and Nikki certainly alluded to it in her address to earlier this week, last week, is the need to provide more effective leadership development within Rotary. At the moment, the Learning Centre provides some really interesting courses. But one of the visions that we have is to create a link with the university and provide if you want, a leadership development program. So young professionals can get, if you want, professional development through being part of their Rotary activities. It's a shame that a lot of training has gone by the wayside in the last couple of years. We have an opportunity, I believe, to work with a couple of universities to set up a hybrid or even virtual degree program, which is part experiential, but part also academic, in terms of providing a program of personal development and leadership development through Rotary experience, which can then be recognized in a professional career footing. So it's linking, if you want, the leadership side requirements of Rotary for the future, the academic and development needs of young professionals, and the ability to gain credibility and credence through academic and professional qualifications.
Chris, I'm conscious of the time, but I just do need to throw this one at you, and that is, you said that you love talking with people, and you love this whole idea of developing people and their personal. So I'm going to really throw this one at you and say, I'm going to give you an ideal dinner party that you're going to host. Who would you invite, living or dead? Who would be the most important people to have around that table?
The first person I would invite is Janice Shackleton, who has been a lifelong hero of mine. And we were lucky enough. We went on a cruise around Cape Horn some years ago, and ended up in the bar that Shackleton had his whiskey on before. We sat in the bar and enjoyed a whiskey. before he went down south on his last voyage. And that was an experience. The second person would be John Kennedy. I remember when he died. It's one of these things, you always remember these things, don't you? It's like it's like when the Twin Towers fell down. You know exactly where you were and what was going on. Because he has been an inspiration. I know he's a flawed character, but some of his ideas and vision are, in fact, a lot of them are relevant today. You know, I've used a number of his quotes. I used a quote at handover about individuals making a difference, trying. And I think that's he had a very good script writer, but he also had a passion for that. So that's the second one. Someone else, I tell you, this is a bit off the wall. I had a very inspirational, they wouldn't say it, geography teacher at school. And he was a guy called Mr. Hudson. Inevitably, but in those days you gave people nicknames. I don't know if they still do, but he was called Soapy because of the Hudson soap people. So he would be someone I'd like to look at. I'm not sure about politicians. I'm going to be controversial here because I think one of the people who whether you like her or not, she did an awful lot for this country. And that was Margaret Thatcher. She changed things in a way in which I think the country needed the change, and I wanted to understand her philosophy because she was a scientist. And she thought about things before she did what she did. And it's arguable that some of the things that she did were necessary, but had been avoided by past governments. I can always remember the time in 1979 when she was elected. And on the other hand, I'm not really, and then you've got sportsmen. I'm not a sport. I mean, I love watching sport. I'm not built for sport. I mean, but someone from the cricketing world. I love cricket. My father used to take me to Huddersfield when Yorkshire played. And a bloke I'd like to talk to is Len Hutton. You won't remember him. People won't remember him. But he was a magnificent. Or if I couldn't get him, I'd have Fred Truman. Might have to mind our language. but those are the sort of some of the inspirational people. And to finish it off, I'm a great student of military history. And I think one of the best writers that lives around here in near Hungerford is Max Hastings.
Yes. And
I just love to hear him talk about some of his research and some of the things he did. So those are, if you want, are some of the people who've inspired me over the years, and just to sort of understand how they think and how they work. And what drove them to really make some of the changes that they wanted. And a student of history like Max Hastings, I think is someone who has reflected very well. He, along with Anthony Beevor, was another one who writes very well. I think much more depth on military history and why, and have a wider perspective on things. So those really are the people I think I'd love to sit down and talk and listen to. Because it'd be a fascinating conversation.
See them also helping to guide your leadership program.
Yeah, in this. Yeah, because they're all people who have impacted my psyche in the last few years of my lifetime.
Chris, I'm going to have.
I'd also like to have my grandfather.
So you're having 7 around the table then. Chris, I'm going to have to say thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today. And certainly, although I know on and off we've worked together over the years, it's lovely having all the gaps filled in. And I've found that absolutely fascinating. And I think you'll find our audience will probably all be rooting for you now when you set off your internationalist role for the district. And I, for one, will be very interested in being involved in that, I have to say. So good luck and thank you very much. And do take a little bit of time off now.